Lifeboat Live, we have 4 simple rules. Number 1, we don't discuss politics, ever. Number 2, this is not a religious channel, and while you might hear people say, God bless you, or I'm going to pray for you, or I wouldn't have gotten through this without my faith, that's fine. What's not fine is to say, my God is better than your God, or here's why you're not getting into heaven. It's not going to fly. Number 3, we believe wholeheartedly if you can't control your tongue, then you can't control your life. So while on board, there's not going to be any cursing in the live chat, period. And number 4, there is no room for mean people on the lifeboat. Because we discuss very sensitive things from people's past in our group setting, we got to protect those people. The only way they feel confident and comfortable discussing those things is in an environment that is free of trolls and mean people. So if you're a mean person or you're a troll, we're going to block you for life. And if your account happens to be less than 24 hours old, we're probably a little suspicious right from the word go. Why? Well, because there are people in this world who enjoy being cruel solely for the sake of being cruel. It's not going to fly here. But if you're here because you're trying to get sober and live your best life, then you might find that the lifeboat is just that, a lifeboat. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and we will see you on deck. Hey, everybody. Remember me? Captain Tommy Scoville of the Lifeboat. Special shout out and thanks to Heather Joy for pulling a couple of shifts. Actually got a full 8 hours of sleep, which I can't even begin to tell you what a luxury that is lately. It's that's a good girl. Where have you been? She didn't seem to want to get on board with the lifeboat today, so we're happy Squirrel is making an appearance. So it was really kind of Heather to do that, and a couple of great shows too. The one she did on Mother's Day is absolutely incredible. This was put together by somebody who is a crew member on the lifeboat that likes to remain anonymous. But how cool is that shirt? Huh? There may be a few of those for giveaways here in the next couple of days. Probably going to do a couple of t-shirt giveaways here on the lifeboat. You saw the thumbnail. Tonight we're going to talk about a subject that is probably one of the biggest plagues for all of us in recovery. This is, HALT gets a lot of, the acronym HALT gets a lot of play. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I've always said that I thought it should be GHALT because I think that one of the great driving forces that brings people back into drug use is guilt. And I don't know that we've ever, ahoy, good to see you too, Todd. I don't know that we've ever spent time talking about the difference between good and bad guilt, because there absolutely is a difference between good and bad guilt. And as I was putting this together, I started like doubling back and looking at some of the guilt shows I've done. And I granted, there's a lot of them, so I probably didn't catch all of them, but I'm fairly confident this is something that we haven't talked about. I kind of like to think of the concept of toxic versus non-toxic guilt. Guilt is something that every one of us is going to have to come to grips with if we're going to remain sober. But guilt is one of the great motivating factors on planet Earth for human beings. Guilt usually means that we know that we've done something wrong, either through omission or commission, right? So commission would be the guilt that we do where we go, oh man, I screwed that up, right? And you're very aware of the fact that what you did is a fairly massive screw up. Hold the phone. Hold the phone. Freedom fighter. Good to see you, my brother from Texas. Glad that you're here, man. It's an honor. Crew member from back in the day. One of my favorite people. So guilt is one of those things that if you get it by commission and you realize that, you know what, I screwed up really badly. This is something all of us deal with. And then there's the guilt that we get through omission. I really should have done this, and I didn't. I had an opportunity to do the right thing, and I didn't. I had the chance to make something right, and I didn't. For those of us who are parents, omission guilt is one of those things that rears its head more often than not. You know, the I'm a father, but I wasn't much of a father. And that is something that all of us have to wrestle with. So when does guilt become toxic? Well, the father example is a great one. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm really not. But I'm content as hell with the father that I am today. In fact, I'll go farther than that. I'm proud as hell of the father that I am today. Spanx Calhoun had an issue today at work. I was the first phone call he made. If my daughter's having a tough time, I'm the first phone call that she makes, even if it's 3 a.m. I'm the phone call that she makes. And that's, to me, as much as I could possibly have hoped for, to be the father that I should have been my entire life. But I'm proud as hell of the father that I am today. The guilt that I feel for the father that I was is the reason that I'm a good father today. You can take guilt, which, by the way, is very, very similar to anger. They are an emotion that are, for all intents and purposes, they're cousins. They mesh together beautifully. And being angry at yourself is not a bad thing. It's a great motivator. It's one of the things that will drive us to be better at whatever it is we do, whether that's a better employee, whether it's a better son or brother or sister or mother or father, whatever the case may be. That kind of anger at yourself can drive you. I wasted 3 decades of my life. That's commission. I'm very aware of that. I screwed up. I actively chose that drugs were going to be the most important things in my life. And I developed a life that enabled me to do mountains of drugs on a daily basis. And that was a choice that was fueled by addiction, but it was a choice nevertheless. And I still feel guilt for it, but I don't feel toxic guilt for it. When I start feeling guilty about those things, I get out this thing and I start writing down, why are you feeling guilty? Why are you feeling angry about this? Is it rational? Because I'll tell you something, we feel guilty often for things that we didn't do. In other words, not omission or commission, but things that we take blame for. Once you start going down the path of addiction, anything bad that happens ends up in your lap. I am not married. I have been divorced twice. I take complete responsibility for being divorced. That said, I hope that the partners I had are taking complete responsibility for their partner, because I won't. I will happily take responsibility for the things that I did. I will feel guilty for them. I will use that guilt to motivate me so that the way I treat people now in life is completely different. But I'm certainly not going to take crap for something that I didn't do. And I'll give you a perfect example. I deal with this on a daily basis. I deal with people who are either guilty of infidelity or they're the victim of infidelity. And in both cases, there's a big group of emotions that go along with that. If your mate cheated on you, that's something that's hard to come to grips with. However, there are times where your mate cheats on you because you're a loser. Sorry. When I was in the life, if somebody was cheating on me, it's because I drove them to it. I can come to grips with that. If somebody cheats on you and it's not your fault, sometimes it becomes toxic as hell because we start looking at ourselves and going, what did I do wrong that made this person go out into the arms of another? I must have done something. Obviously, it's on me. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. And you can become addicted to that feeling. It can become your baseline. We talk all the time about gamblers. Gamblers get up $60,000 sitting in a machine. Woohoo! 60 grand up. I bet I could turn it into 120. And they sit there and they keep hitting that button until they're broke. And from 60,000 up to the walk of shame to the ATM machine to get out more money. Because the baseline for that gambler has become feeling hopeless, feeling like they just blew everything they had, the inability to make rent and the inability to pay bills, and that manic feeling of, I've got to go put this together, I got to make this happen, whatever the case may be, becomes the baseline. And our brains, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the lifeboat, your brain latches a hold of base, the base level, whatever that is. For the heroin addict, the base level is simplicity. I'm either on dope or I'm getting dope, and everything else falls away, right? God falls away, family falls away, responsibilities fall away, jobs fall away, everything falls away. And that simplicity becomes the baseline. So that when somebody gets sober and holy hell, now you've got God, you've got family, you've got jobs, you've got responsibilities, you've got bills that have to be paid, you have a room that needs to be cleaned. All of these things that are so foreign to us can drive you back into a life that you don't want to live. Guilt can do the exact same thing. Irrational guilt, toxic guilt. I know it's my fault. It's my fault. Everything is my fault. You can become addicted to that feeling. And if you do, breaking out of it is next to impossible. That is where the pad and the pen come in really handy. If you start feeling yourself going down the road of feeling guilty about virtually everything in your life, nothing has happened that isn't your fault. I'll give you another great example. Do you know how many people that I did time with who had a relative die while they were in prison? Thank God that did not happen to me. I prayed for it every day. It was my biggest fear while I was in there, is that I would lose my dad while I was incarcerated. But the people who do blame the death on them being incarcerated. I watched it happen so many times. I watched it happen to a very close friend of mine who was in my drug group, my drug class, the lifeboat inside, whatever you want to call it. His mom died. His mom died because she had cancer. His mom fought cancer for over a decade. But you couldn't convince him of that. In his mind, his mom died because he went to prison. And her death was his. He owned it. And the guilt from that was what kept him going back again and again and again. And we went through some pretty simple drills, stuff that we talk about all the time on the lifeboat. I said, you need to write your mom a letter. And honestly, he looked at me and went, I don't think my mom's going to be able to read this letter. I said, no, of course not. It's not for her. It's for you. But write your mom a letter. Start working through these things. And you work through these things by putting pen to paper. Is your feeling of guilt rational? What do I feel guilty for? I felt guilty that my mom died while I was in prison. Okay, that's okay. You should be. You should feel guilty that you're in prison. That's normal guilt. It should drive you to never want to go back to prison. It should be the driving force in your life that makes you want to stay out. It makes you work. It makes you clean up things. It makes you make your bed in the morning. It makes you dedicate your life to something more important than yourself. But if you get out of prison and the first thing you do is you grab a fifth of bourbon because you can't cope with the fact that you killed your mom by going to prison. Rational versus irrational guilt. Figuring out which is the most important thing that you're going to do if you have any hope whatsoever of remaining sober. This is a rugged journey. Under the best of circumstances, this is a rugged journey. While we were addicts, we developed a baseline and our brain latched onto it. Think of it as a default setting. What's your default setting? You know what mine is today? Honestly, joy. I don't feel guilty saying that. It's the truth. My default setting is joy. Does that mean I'm happy 24/7? It doesn't. It means that if I'm sitting doing absolutely nothing and there's no external stimuli, I'm a happy person. I'm a really happy person. Getting my probation terminated early was huge, a huge thing to help that along. But it wasn't an accident. I did everything right. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just stating a fact. I did everything right. I got out and I followed a path that somebody else had built for me. And he talked to me about things I was going to encounter when I got out based on God knows what, because he's been in since he was 17. But I followed that roadmap. I'm proud of that. Are there things in my life I'm unproud of? Yeah. You probably saw the video that I did with my brother Johnny. And when he said, your biggest regret, the time that I spent away from my family is huge. It's huge. I missed so much of Cedar's life. It's incredible. I missed so much of Calhoun's life. Fortunately, I was there for a lot of his when he was in his formative years, changed a lot of diapers. But I wrestle with the guilt of not being there. You think I'm not going to take a phone call from him? I'll stop the lifeboat. Damn straight. I will stop doing what I'm doing right now to take his call. He calls during the lifeboat. I take the call. Are you all right? Is this an emergency? Can I call you after the boat? But trust and believe I will turn this off. Because as much as I want to help people in this world, there are things that are going to come before that. Plain and simple. If this threatened my relationship with God, I'd shut it down or hand it to somebody else. If it threatened my relationship with my family or my children or any of that. This is a mission. What I do here is a mission. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of everybody here and how much everybody here has changed the lives of so many people. It's driven in large part by guilt, but I don't sit around and feel guilty all the time. I don't. It works its way in because it's going to work its way into your life. Hear that? Listen really carefully to what I'm about to say because I'll repeat it slow as hell. You are going to be plagued by guilt because of your addiction for the rest of your life. It's not going to go away. What we learn to do is get small doses of it. When it comes in, you cope with it. One of the other things that turns guilt into toxic guilt is making it go away through chemicals or through any other mechanism that is unhealthy. And you say, well, what other than chemicals? There are people who rage. That's something that I've really struggled with. One of the things that I got addicted to, one of my baselines, if you've heard me in traffic, I'm not great. I don't follow people and beat them up. And there was a time in my life where I did that. There was a time in my life where you cut me off. I was chasing you until you ran out of gas. If my brother Johnny's here, he probably remembers a few of those events where we weren't who we are today. Do I feel guilty for those? I do. I do. They're healthy. It's healthy guilt. I've done things to people that I'll never do again because I don't like the way it makes me feel. And if you think that's a bad thing, then you haven't come to grips with the difference between good and bad guilt. When you start understanding that when you begin to feel guilty, it's your brain telling you maybe you need to do something better. Maybe you need to work a little harder. Maybe you need to stay a little bit more focused. Maybe you're not talking to God enough. What are your defense mechanisms for everything you do in a recovery? I have a routine set up for my life. That routine, I thought I poured bug juice, jungle juice into that. I poured lemonade. And it's so tart. I was not expecting that at all. Sorry. Woo! When guilt comes on, you cope with it. You sit down and you work through it. I embrace it at this point. I swear to you, I do. When guilt comes on, when I start feeling like I'm remembering something that I did that I really am uncomfortable with, then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to get out a pen and I'm going to answer some really simple questions. Why is this coming up today? Right? That's the first question. Why now? Why right now am I thinking about somebody that I ripped off? Why now am I thinking about lies? Am I heading in that direction? Is something going on? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it can be the smallest thing. Trish Killian, good to see you. Sometimes it can be the smallest thing. You see something and you're right back to a place and a time. Alan Ballantyne tells a great story about this. If you ever go back and watch his interviews, he talks about walking by a train station and he's going to see his parents. Alan is vicious. If Alan gets a vacation, he goes to spend time with his parents. Every time, right? If he has a vacation, whether it's 3 days or whether it's a fortnight, as my friend would say, he's going to go spend it with his parents. And it's a big part of his recovery. It's a big part of his sobriety. But he walked by a train station and he said that he had been in that train station waiting for someone to deliver dope for 3 hours. 3 hours of lying to his parents, calling them, all of the different reasons why. You know what? I'm about to leave. Such and such happened. I set my phone down and I couldn't find it. So I was running around like crazy. But when he walks by that train station, that's going to be something that triggers him for the rest of his life. That's the way it is, right? There are things that are going to always be triggers that are going to bring guilt back into your life. Sit down and write down that guilt has just come into your life. I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling guilty about that time that I was at the train station for 3 hours lying to my family. Have you come clean? Did you ever tell your family the story? These are the kind of things that will get guilt under control. If you feel guilty for something that you did to somebody and you've never made amends to that person, and there are times you can't, right? Somebody's passed away, they're no longer there, or you making amends is going to open a wound for somebody. You can make amends without ripping a Band-Aid off of a relationship with somebody. The number of people that I have hugged and just said, you know what? I got 9 months worth of I'm sorries. The number of things I could apologize to you for. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I really am. I don't want to drag up every single thing that I did to you, but I want you to know that I'm sorry for every time I lied to you. I'm sorry for every time that I stole or any time I get through these things. If not, trust and believe they're going to become toxic. And when they become toxic, your serenity is in jeopardy. When your serenity is in jeopardy, so is your sobriety. If you can't make amends to somebody, call somebody in your 5. Think I'm crazy? Give this a try. I've done it. Call somebody. Alan, let me tell you a story about somebody that I ripped off. This person isn't in my life. I couldn't find this person if I want to, but I would really like to be able to tell them sorry. I'll tell the person the story. And when that story is over, when I'm done talking to that person, my head will be in a place. Sorry, I'm checking the battery because it just did something funky. Now we're good. My head will be in a place where I'm no longer in danger. You got to learn that this is baggage, and it's baggage you're not getting rid of. You're going to be carrying the backpack of guilt for the rest of your life. If you do it right? Journaling, writing things down, working through things with you as your counselor every time you can. This thing is the greatest counselor in the world. If that doesn't work, then you take it to the next level and you call somebody in your 5. But if you think, I feel like crap about this, I'll just hold it in. I'll just suck this inside, right? And I'll make something to eat, right? Or I'll take a nap. I will do something to make this go away. I'll go play with it with the dog and throw a ball. I'll go ride a bike. I'll go run. It's not going to get it done. It's not. What you're doing is you're planting a really unhealthy seed. And every single time you don't come to grips with what's causing that guilt, you're watering it, you're giving it sunlight, and you will turn that into something that's going to bear fruit. And when it does, you're going to get high. I promise you. Guilt will drive you back. Why? Because the greatest eraser of guilt on this planet is drugs. Drugs and alcohol will make guilt go away. Only for about 8 hours. But it will wipe it clean like that. My father, Papa Scoville, used to say that there is no pillow softer than a clean conscience. And I honestly remember saying to him once, you know what? You'd never tried heroin. Because heroin will make you forget any guilt. It will make you forget any pain. But it doesn't go away. It grows. While you're tucking that thing away, it grows and it gets bigger and it gets gnarlier. Every single day, I deal with people who are coping with all of the things that they have been drugging for 3 months, 9 months, 2 years, 30 years, whatever the case may be. You remember when you first got sober and a commercial would come on TV and the next thing you know, you're crying? Because all of the things that you haven't coped with, all of the things that you really haven't gotten completely under control, all of those emotions that were raw, right at the surface, you've been just painting over them with drugs, painting over them with alcohol, painting over them with whatever your substance or habit of choice was. Because believe it or not, I know that this sounds so foreign to people whose drug of choice is not gambling, but gambling does to a gambler what heroin does to a heroin addict. Sex does to some addicts what drugs do to another. Eating, one of the largest addictions on the planet. Heather did a show about it, right? I did one last year. Eating is such a problem for people in addiction. Very often when somebody gets sober, they're able to stay sober because they balloon up to 310 pounds. Because every time they start feeling those feelings of guilt or those feelings of shame or any of those feelings, you know what? A bag of Doritos. Sounds silly, right? It sounds silly because that's not your habit of choice. But it does the same thing for those people. You understand that the malfunctioning reward center of the brain, the reward center of the addict's brain, does something that doesn't happen to the rest of the world. So this kind of behavior where we, put 4,000 calories into our body. People say, oh, I'm going to have a chocolate bar. It's comfort food. Well, it's a funny expression until it isn't. If you're using food as a way to cope with the fact that you feel guilty, you're going to weigh 300 pounds. It's going to be a problem that you have to cope with, just like your first addiction. If you decide, and we had a guy on the boat, I won't say his name. He was very open about this, by the way. But he came on and he did a couple of shows. We did a few interviews with him, and they were great interviews. And his drug of choice was methamphetamine, and he had been doing it his entire life. I mean, honestly, from the time he was a little boy, because his family was in the drug trade. And he got sober. He got sober by meeting a bunch of people on the lifeboat who really helped change his life. And he took up online gambling because it did the exact same thing. And I remember having conversations with this person that just said, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And it does the same thing. It makes him feel comfortable in his own skin. Hitting that button and waiting to see if you're a winner or you're a loser. Each time they hit that button, they get that little hit of dopamine. It's the brain malfunctioning. You understand? This is why there are people that can go in and say, yeah, I go to Vegas 2 times a year, I'll take $300. I go play some blackjack. Sometimes I double my money. Sometimes I lose it. And then I go upstairs and go to sleep. I wake up the next day. I have a continental breakfast and I get on a plane. Then there are people for whom that is going to literally do what cocaine did or what heroin did or what booze did. Why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you all this because it's a backpack you're going to carry around. And if you start using any other mechanism other than the good old notebook, communication, connection is the opposite of addiction. Right? Are you tired of me saying that yet? Do you know the biggest connection in my life for real? I have a great relationship with God. And it literally is the linchpin for everything that I do on this planet. At this point, for real, everything that I do on this planet is God motivated in one way or another. But the biggest connection that I have on planet Earth is this. I promise you, this is it, right? Because this is a connection to myself. I don't have to share something with somebody that maybe is too personal. I've been really open with my past on the lifeboat. If you think I've told you everything, you're crazy. There are things that I'm never going to say in public. I didn't kill anyone. It's nothing like that. But there are things that saying out loud would probably throw me into a tailspin. There are things that I still really, really struggle with. And when those things make a visit, if I bottle them up, I'm going to lose. And for me, winning is getting off of this planet without ever getting high again. That's winning, right? That's game over. I win. If I don't deal with the things that I've done in my past, then I am going to lose. Plain and simple. And it may not be heroin. I cannot imagine me ever doing an opiate again. But I'm susceptible to anything else that starts to throw that switch on my malfunctioning reward center. I know it. If you don't think you are, you've got some stuff to come to grips with. This is something that people struggle with. You're an addict. You're an addict. For real. I live in the town where I could go buy pot legally. And by the way, I could do that today. There's nothing holding me back. I am no longer subject to drug tests. I'm no longer subject to anything. Do you know how fast I would become a 16 times a day pot smoker? I'm not saying this is for everybody, by the way, but I know who I am. That can't become a coping mechanism for me. It can't. And I know me well enough to know that it can't be a celebration. You know what? 3 times a year, I'll just, I can smoke a joint. I'm not that person. I'm not that person. The first time I go and I smoke a joint, I'm going to go, you know what? There was a little something bothering me right before I did this, and it's gone. Like, it's not bothering me anymore. I know that if I start feeling uncomfortable in my own skin, that I got to pick this up and I got to start writing. And when I'm done writing, I will feel comfortable in my own skin. If I decide for a shortcut, because trust and believe, this is more difficult than that would be easier and probably more fun. It would be. But how long do you think my body would say, okay, this works? I would get to a point where, whether it's weed, whether it's beer, whether it's anything else, things I didn't have a problem with. If I started drinking every time I started, just, I'm a little stressed, so I'm just going to, take the edge off with a few beers. It would get to a point really quickly where my brain would go, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. I mean, yeah, maybe 3 or 4 hours or whatever. What you need is an opiate. It would happen. I'm not stupid. I'm a lot of things. and I have spent great chunks of my life being stupid. But the journal, the world's greatest connection for me, has told me exactly what I am. There's no ambiguity. There's no gray area. It's black and white. And I know who I am. I know what I am. So when I start feeling guilty, and it happens 3 or 4 times a week. It used to happen 3 or 4 times a day. And I'll be really honest. I used to journal a hell of a lot more than I do now. When I was incarcerated, I probably spent 3 or 4 hours a day with pen to paper. True story. I spent ungodly amounts of time writing. And I spent, for a good chunk of that, I probably spent that much time each day talking to Q and really opening up and really sort of, dumping whatever was going on in my life. I had somebody there that I could talk to. I had a real point of connection. But I remember like it was yesterday when a guy on the yard decided to try to kill the warden. He had taken the kind of sticks that you get out of popsicles, because in arts and craft, there are people who build entire cities out of this. You would not believe the talent of some of these people. But in order to build those, you get these little double-edged razors, and they do a very good job of shaking people down and patting them down and making them go through metal detectors and all of these things to make sure that that blade never leaves the hobbycraft section of the prison. But somebody got one of those blades out, and they got out those sticks and they glued them together, and then they taped them. And this thing was a absolute killer. It was as sharp as a straight razor, and it was that long. And he got a hold of the warden, who put his hand up, and if he didn't, it would have been the end, because the guy cut him from here all the way down. It got him to the bone across his arm, and he took, I think, 56 staples to put him back together. When I got stabbed in the stomach, I took 5. I can't imagine what 56 would be like. I mean, it's a cut. But when that happened, I was cut off from Q. I was cut off from everybody in the prison. I couldn't talk to my family. I couldn't make a phone call. I couldn't send an email. Plain and simple, you're not doing it. I wrote a letter the first day and said, I don't know when I'm going to be able to call again. It's going to be a long time. This is an ugly one. And it was a 6-month lockdown. 6 months. So for 6 months, that journal became my best friend. I had a cellmate that had zero desire whatsoever to talk about sobriety. In fact, I spent 6 months listening to this guy piss and moan about how he couldn't get dope, which isn't great for sobriety either. So I got in that notebook. And every other week I would have to buy another one at store, because that was it. And there was a month and a half where we weren't allowed to do that. Couldn't go to store. I was asking for paper. It's called a BP form. It's how you fill out a piece of paper to complain that the prison isn't doing this or that. And every time a new shift would come on, I'd say, I need a BP 9, an 8, a 9, a 10, 11, and a 12. I need all 5 of them, right? And they're 5 pieces of paper each. You write on them and they go through all of them. But I was turning them over and using the back of them as a journal. And I would have written on the floor if I couldn't have got that. I'm not kidding. I would have taken the books that I had in there and I would have written at the top. I would have written at the bottom because it works. It's my coping mechanism. It's how I deal with guilt. This was a time in my life where I had just made connection with my daughter for the first time in both of our lives. I mean, I knew her when she was a baby. She obviously didn't remember that. And all of a sudden, I couldn't talk to her anymore. I couldn't email her. I was doing this every day. And I remember the guilt. You know, I just get back in her life and now she can't talk to me. And I just look like a loser that's not getting a hold of her. And I didn't have a phone number for her. So I wrote to my sister. And I asked my sister to reach out and tell her what was going on. But that guilt was there every day. Every day. And then those automatic negative thoughts start doing a number on your brain. They start crawling all over there going, she would have been better off if she didn't meet you in the first place. You get back in her life and now you're gone again. Boy, you look like a winner, don't you? And it would just, take me apart. And I promise you, people, that if I didn't write down what I was feeling every time it came up, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Believe that. In fact, if it wasn't for this book, none of us would be talking. Because that book has gotten me through times when nothing else would do it. If you're not journaling, this whole subject matter of the difference between good and bad guilt is irrelevant. It really is. You're not going to figure out whether or not the guilt you're feeling is good or bad unless you write it down. You won't. I'm 8 years into this. If I start feeling guilty, I got to write it down. And I got to start asking myself the same questions. And it may sound silly as hell, but I have to ask myself the same questions every single time. Is this rational? Are you being rational? Because I'll tell you something. Irrational guilt comes up all the time. I told the story on the boat. I don't remember how in depth I got. But I was driving on McCarran Boulevard, which is a loop. So if it was Houston, they would call it the 610. It's just a loop that goes around the entire city. So you can get on it and drive in circles for the rest of your life until you run out of gas. But this loop, as opposed to being called a loop or a spur, which is what most cities call it, is named after a fairly famous politician from Nevada history, whose name is McCarran. They also named the airport in Las Vegas after him. But I was on McCarran Boulevard driving by Home Depot. And my second wife pulled up next to me in traffic. This was a shocker, right? Because I hadn't seen her since the day I got sentenced. But she looked at me and I looked at her. And there was that instant, she absolutely knew who I was and I absolutely knew who she was. And both of us became ridiculously uncomfortable. Her far more than me. I watched her color literally just change. And then I started to feel guilty about it. Really guilty about it. So I came home and I started writing it down because you know what? It was irrational guilt. It really was. I had come to grips with everything that had gone on in our relationship. I've taken credit for my faults in that. Ad nauseum, I've taken credit for that. So why was I feeling this irrational guilt? Well, I wouldn't have known if I didn't sit down and write it down. Well, it was a huge trigger, wasn't it? I mean, this is the first time I've seen her in person. And if she had gone like this and given me the finger, I probably would have just driven home. But that wasn't the effect. She was visibly shaken. And I started feeling guilty, like maybe I did something horrible right then to make her feel nervous or scared, which is, of course, ridiculous. But you can beat the crap out of yourself behind ridiculous guilt. And this may not make sense to everybody. But if I hadn't gone home and gotten that notebook, that would have been taking that thing and putting it inside, giving it a little water, making sure it's in the sunlight, and I would be willing to bet you any amount of money we wouldn't be having this conversation. If you're getting the fact that I think this thing is pretty damn important to get through guilt, then maybe I'm laying it on thick enough. If you do not want guilt to destroy your ability to stay sober, you're going to journal your way through it. Maybe you're blessed enough to have somebody in your 5 who's that close and you can talk to them at any point you want. because that will do the same thing. It will also drive that person insane. It will. I mean, the idea for the 5 is that they're a ripcord, right? We have things that we do. What's the first thing we do? We go, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to go outside and see if the ants go away. I'm going to get out of the room that I'm in. I'm going to stop looking at the same 4 walls. I'm going to get some air in my lungs. I'm going to exercise, which is going to get my malfunctioning reward center to actually function. My reward center goes, exercise. This is a good thing. You should do this more. Little hit of dopamine. If that doesn't get it done, you go to the next phase. The book. You start to evaluate your emotions. Is this feeling rational? Have you ever watched one of those commercials on television where they show animals that just look hellaciously abused? Animals that are in cages, and you just think, oh man, it tears your heart out. There are people who will absolutely go into a tailspin behind that. Honestly, I've had it wreck me. I've had it take a good day and make it a bad one. I'm not joking. Hasn't happened since I left prison because I don't watch anything on TV anymore. But those commercials could take me and throw me into a tailspin where all of a sudden I just wasn't right. If I don't go to the book, then my day is just crap. I don't know why. And I start letting automatic negative thoughts run rampant in my brain. I don't know about you. I can't take that risk. I don't have the luxury of allowing 6 hours of automatic negative thoughts to run across my gray matter. Can't do it. I can't. And I don't. I haven't had more than 30 minutes tops of ant activity in my life in 5 years because I won't put up with it. If I start getting automatic negative thoughts running rampant for 15 minutes, then going outside isn't getting it done. I got to go to the notebook. And I'll be honest, very few times has that not got it done. When it doesn't, I either call Johnny or I call Alan or I call someone in my 5 and I tell them I'm having a bad day. And I'm blessed as hell, people. I really am. My 5 is bulletproof. If I call Alan Ballantyne at 4 a.m., he's going to take the call. He's going to be nice as hell, and he's going to help me through whatever I'm working with. And there have been times where we've had the conversation and I go, I need to talk to you again. You know what I mean? There's something I got to do right now. Can you call me back? Because I don't feel like I got through this. One of the cliches that I have said on this boat, I don't know how many times, is that people prepare for a fishing trip more than they prepare for the rest of their life without drugs or alcohol. And I will stick by this because it's probably the smartest thing I've ever said on the lifeboat. It's a fact. If you do not plan for your sobriety, go ahead and start planning for your relapse. Seriously. Go ahead and start planning the day you're going to get high. You have to have a plan. What's going to happen when these things come up? The thing that I've got going for me in my recovery more than anything else is nothing is ever going to come up that I don't have a plan on how to deal with. And the beautiful thing is they're all basically the same plan. Obviously, if it's something that is so emotionally jarring that I am literally shaking, I'm not going to go to the book. I need a bit better connection than that. I need to talk to somebody, but I will make a phone call before I let 2 seconds go by. I will dial that number because I'm in danger. If I'm feeling that messed up, I'm in danger, wild danger. If you get to a point where those feelings are like a tiger running up behind you, then you're going to get off of this planet sober. You're going to get to a point where you say out loud, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm never going to get high again. I'm a recovered heroin addict. Boy, do I tick off people when I say that. But I am. I'm a recovered heroin addict. I'm never going to do opiates again. I'm not going to get high again. It's not going to be a part of my life. I don't need it to be. I have this great little system in place, and it works beautifully. I also embrace guilt, as long as it's good guilt. I don't wallow in it. I don't allow it to stick around, but I always allow it to motivate me. If that guilt comes on, there's a good reason for it. There really is. And 90% of the time, I start feeling guilty if I miss 2 lifeboats. And I have a co-host. You know, it's almost cruel to not let a co-host do 2 or 3 shows in a row because you get into a rhythm, right? When you do a few in a row, you start, yeah, okay, now you start feeling like maybe you're getting a handle on it. It's hard when you only do a couple a week. It's really a difficult thing. But I start feeling guilty when I'm not here for 3 shows. But if I go to the book and I start writing it down, it's an irrational guilt. It's not logical. And when you realize that guilt isn't logical, when you realize that guilt isn't based in something that's legit, it goes away. Huh? It goes away. Did you catch that? When you can establish that the feeling you have is not based in something logical, when you can establish that the feeling that you have is illogical, it goes away. With haste, it goes away. I mean, like snapping your fingers, it's gone. So the question becomes, do you have a plan? Are you ready to sit down and determine whether or not what you're feeling is rational or irrational? If it's irrational, it's toxic. Toxic, right? That word gets thrown around these days with terrible words after it, right? Toxic masculinity. It's one of my favorites. But toxic guilt, that's a great combination of 2 words. It's a great combination of 2 words. Toxic guilt is cancer for sobriety. You hear? It is cancer for sobriety. It will eat you alive from the inside out. And you will end up on the bottle, on the joint, on the bong, on the needle, on the straw, whatever. You will get back to what you know best. You will get back to base. The default setting. If you allow that to be the default setting, it's going to be. If this becomes your default setting, if this becomes where I got to go, when I'm not feeling right, I got to go to that. Every time, I got to go to that. That's it. That's where I go. That's my home run. If you can get to that point, you're going to leave this planet sober. I promise you. It's not rocket science. It does require some dedication. It really does. Because the first couple of times you start feeling guilty and you put your pen to the paper, it's going to be as uncomfortable a feeling as anything you've ever done. Do you know why? Because your brain doesn't want you to win. It doesn't. Think of all of the things you have to engage to make that writing possible. Right? We've got to use all the parts of the brain. We have to actually turn on the thinking part of our brain in a way that we probably haven't in a very long time. And the brain goes, I don't like that at all. Can't we just shoot some dope? Can't we just make this go away? It's a whole lot easier. That's the baseline. Not anymore. Not anymore. That's not my baseline. I can sit here today and tell you that the number of times I've thought of doing dope, and I don't mean, hey, I might get high. I mean, boy, it would be nice to make this go away. There have been 5 of them in the last 5 years. I know every one of them. I know what caused them. They are so infrequent that I know every one of them that has happened in the last 5 years. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. You want to be in a place where you can feel confident that no matter what comes down the pike, you're going to get through it. I talk to people every day who say, I'm doing really good now, but I'm worried. Well, then start journaling. Grab a pen and a piece of paper. Go put it to the paper and write, I'm nervous. I worry. I worry I won't be able to keep this going. You know what will happen? Within about 10 or 15 minutes of writing, it's going to tell you why you're nervous. And then you can begin to ask yourself the same simple questions that you ask every single time. Is this logical? Is this a logical fear or is this irrational? When you first get sober, the idea that you might use again is terrifying. It's terrifying. You get this newfound life and people that respect you and people that believe you. People who treat you like a human being instead of a junkie. That's easy to fall in love with. And anytime you fall in love with something, the fear of losing it is a very real thing. I love my sobriety. I really do. But I'm to the point now where me and sobriety are married. I mean, we may have an argument along the way, but we're never going to get divorced. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to tell you what a great job I'm doing. I'm trying to tell you that Q did an amazing job. And if you follow what the guy did for me, I promise you it's going to work for you. But if you're not journaling, man, I hope everything works out for you, man. I really do. And when it doesn't, we're still going to be here. I promise. When it doesn't work out and you relapse, come back. We're not going to give you crap. We're not going to make you feel stupid. We're going to be here for you. That's who we are. It's the basis of this boat. Tell me you don't love that shirt. It's the basis for the boat. I'm not going to be mad at you. But you want this to go well, then you need to keep doing what you're doing. How's this? How's that? You know what that is? That's a dopamine hit. Think I'm kidding? I swear to God. It's a dopamine hit. A good one. Phil, I'm proud of you, brother. I really am. Man, that's cool. I love hearing that. I freaking love hearing that. I really do. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of it. It doesn't even lose its punch. If I get 40 of those a day, they all feel the same way. It's a hit of dopamine. It really is. It really is. When we get somebody on medical assisted treatment, and people, we're on a roll right now like you can't imagine on the lifeboat. We're killing it. We really are. We're killing it. We've been very, very successful. We've had some really generous benefactors that have made it possible to get way more people on the medical assisted treatment than we've ever done in the past. And that's a buzz. And it's always going to be a buzz. It's going to be one of those things that until I can't sit in this chair anymore, it's going to be something that always makes me feel fantastic. Am I dumb enough to think that every person we get into medical assisted treatment is going to win? It's not going to happen. It's not. But we tried. We gave it hell. We did everything we could to put them in a position to be successful. If I can talk them into this, they're going to make it. But there are people listening to me right now that have been on this boat a year that probably don't do this. It's not an easy thing. It's not. It's the most difficult part of the whole deal. But you know the best part is? We're addicts. You start writing in that thing, and I promise you'll get addicted to it. That's a damn good addiction, people. That is a healthy addiction. They exist. Exercise is a healthy addiction. It really is. You know, it's rare that you're going to come across people who are exercising so much that it's unhealthy. But start writing in that damn journal and watch your life change. Watch your life get better. I promise you, man, if this was my advice, I'd tell you to run like hell. This is Q's. And that guy didn't make a lot of mistakes. That's the truth. Very, very few mistakes. And for those that write to me and tell me that they pray for Q, please keep doing it. I am of the firm belief that he's going to walk out. I really believe that. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I believe we're going to get him out. I really do. Peppers have been a healthy addiction for me. They have. They've been one of the great healthy addictions of all time. And you know what? Not just for you. There are a bunch of people in recovery for whom capsaicin is a huge thing. It really is. It's a very, very healthy addiction. And today, just today, Mr. Ray sent me the coolest text message where he went by and talked to a place that uses horticulture as a way to work with people who are in recovery. And he talked to them about peppers and about capsaicin, and they were interested as hell. It was such a cool text. He's like, I don't know if anything will come of it. We never know if anything will come of anything. Right? But if you're having that conversation, holy hell, you're doing something right. And I think something will come of it. That's my personal opinion. But I really do believe that something will come of it. I really do. I think something's going to come of it. It's good stuff. Chili Phil, I'm proud of you, brother. I really am. I'm proud of you, man. That's awesome. Stay the course, brother. Stay the course. I'll tell you something else. This is a gospel truth. I've worked with a lot of people to help them get sober. Between what I did inside and what I've done outside, I've worked with a lot of people. I've yet to have somebody say to me, I really regret getting sober. I have yet to meet the person that says, I preferred it the way it was. Hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it won't. I'm sure that person's out there. It's a kind of a sad world. But as of yet, I don't know anybody that regrets getting sober. You know? Start journaling. Journal at night, journal during the day. And if you start feeling guilty, grab that book. Because that's an emotion that we just can't let coast. Do you understand? You can't let it coast. If you do, it will take root. It'll start to grow. And when that fruit comes out, we'll be here. Seriously, we'll be here to put you back together and do everything we can. But the easier method is a cheap notebook that no one's going to read but you. That's a beautiful thing. Flamin' Jackson, good to see you, brother. Really glad that you're here, man. I love Jackson. We will see you tomorrow, Scoob. Have a good night. Alrighty, peeps. Are you ready? No one gets clean to be miserable. Ultra MAGA. Well said. Well said. People, I'm Tommy Scoville. This here, that's Squirrel Nut Zipper. She is a cat in a basket. A little late to the show, but we're going to cut her some slack. She's out of practice. All right, peeps. Get a notebook. You won't regret it. I'm Tommy Scoville. We'll see you the next time around. God bless. Reach out and try to save somebody. Please. Be really shocked the great things that can happen. Trust me. Oh, look at that. There we go. That's better. Say again, Squirrel.